thank you. Okay, so I see some familiar faces and some new faces. So I'm really pleased that we're coming up on, we're in the teens now. You might still get a few more in the next few minutes. But what I find really exciting about the session this morning is that what we're trying to do is think in new ways about how to increase engagement with different working groups, different communities, and also increasing the ways in which we might do outreach related to RDA outputs, related to community outputs, you have the graph of people in the RDA and they're all linked together via different working groups or communities, but we're just trying to increase those edges in the network graph. And as the RDA Ambassador Program which is quite a few months ago now. Are we coming on to a year ago now? Honestly, I can't remember. We thought it would be in everyone's best interest to try to see if we can carry forward the momentum we had from the Ambassador Program and extend it outward to RDA members as a whole. And so we're still trying to find our ways to exactly how this interest group would work, which is why we had a session at the last plenary and another one now, rather than going straight through with the charter. The interest group that we're proposing is not a standard interest group. Normally in the RDA, when you start an interest group, that the point of the interest group is, well, one of the major points is to create working groups. So those working groups then produce outputs, and we end up with something that is actively producing particular outputs aimed at a particular goal, which is the interest group makes sure that goal is quite targeted and focused. Instead, and we didn't really know whether there's not really one type of group within the RDA that fits what we want to do. So this session is about trying to reach more of a conclusion about what we can do as an interest group for the RDA community as a whole under this umbrella idea of ambassadors or champions or something like that. And so your input is really what we're looking for today, because we almost want to be facilitators in a way. You know, we want to use the interest group to hear what different working groups and communities are working on, trying to bring connections and collaborations across the disciplines, promoting cohesion, really cross-discipline cohesion within the RDA, because so many working groups are focused on a single domain. When we were ambassadors, we were asked to choose a domain for our ambassadorship. So really, that's what I want you to be thinking about: themes of engagement, outreach, connectivity, as we go through the next few slides. Just a reminder, Francoise, you have your hand up.
Yes, it's just, I see that Stephanie has written that interest group can and some do produce outputs, but I would like to add that interest groups are not obliged to produce something tangible, but networking is quite, for me, well, I have not evaluated interest groups for a long time now, but for me, the networking aspect is quite acceptable for an interest group if it goes in the RDA strategy. So I am not worried if you don't have an applicable output, but and you do real networking job in the interest of the RDA and its community.
Oh, that is fantastic. I was hoping you would say something like that, Francoise, because you know a lot about how these things work. And that's sort of what Beth and Matty and Sarah and I were thinking about as we've been writing this. Christian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, yes. Sorry for not putting the camera because I'm just arriving at work now. So just to complement on what has been said is that in fact, for me, the networking aspects can be tangible, can be considered as tangible output, because it's really, you can really list what kind of networking, what did you reach out, and all those things are, I think, can be considered as an output for me, because it's really something that helps us going toward the objectives.
I think that is a really nice way of putting what I was trying to say, and also Francois, the same for you. Considering the networking aspect as one of the outputs is really smart, and I've actually written that down in the notes. So I want people to, which brings me handily to the fact that we do have the notes, and there's a few people that have just trailed in the last few minutes. So I'm resending the link to the collaborative notes. Please do consider adding your name if you're here, just so that we can have a record. The RDA has asked me to do that, make sure we have the name, and also to say that as you joined, you probably noticed that you're being recorded. So please note that you are being recorded. And please do help out with the notes, because while I have my screen up here, and I have a second window, but so if you see me looking to the right, that's me looking at the notes and also at the chat window to make sure I get everyone's comments as we go. So Stephanie, you've talked about as well, you've also mentioned what I think is complementary to what Christian said. Do you want to say that to the group, or do you want me to just summarize? You talk about compiling lessons learned or developing networks is an output. Do you have anything else?
No, basically, I mean, I wrote most of the documents on the RDA website about what to do when you create an interest working group. So unless they've been superseded, which I don't know, there's certainly an expectation that interest groups do something and produce something, but it doesn't have to be the same thing that working groups produce. And I think having something like, for example, you talk about lessons learned from the RDA ambassadors. I don't know how that's been published previously. That might be a good thing to do, but also how to actually develop networks and how to reach out and develop those connections. That could be a really useful thing, in particular if it's not just focused on Europe or particular regions or particular domains, but could be transferred to others. That would be a really useful thing, I think.
That is really great. And so I should say, when I was speaking about my understanding of interest groups, I was speaking from a position of ignorance, and I'm happy to say that. And the reason is that I've been co-chairing a couple of working groups now. And so I feel like I'm starting to understand working groups at the point either of coming into an active working group or sometimes starting at the very beginning of one. But I've never had anything directly to do with running an interest group. So this is the first this is the first time. And Stephanie, I appreciate your joke as well. But I know that there's people in this room right now who have a lot more knowledge than me about how RDA groups work. So I thank you all so far for your input, because this is fantastic. Francoise.
Yes, the point, I think, I know Stephanie says it's written in the IG's charter to have outputs, but you know, RDA has a mission to produce technical and sociological things. And I think that having a sociological output is quite acceptable, and you can explain it in when you produce your charter.
I think that's amazing. And I think it's really gratifying to hear everyone saying this, because I think that means that it's, so far we've had lots of positive comments about these types of, I hate to say soft outputs, but it does allow a contrast between the sort of official outputs of documents and minimal guidelines and, you know, best practices that often come out of RDA outputs, which are just as useful. And so I'm really pleased to have you all here, because this is really useful to hear that we're sort of aiming in the right direction. And it makes me quite excited for what we're going to be doing in the next hour and a bit. So if Francoise, you still have your hand up. Do you have something else to add before we carry on, or? Okay, lovely. Right, I will try to see, and Matty, if you could also, and Francoise, anyone who can just shout at me and interrupt me if you see someone with a question and I haven't seen it. So I'm very, very happy to be interrupted as an American, even though I'm now also British. I do have a tendency to talk. Anne, I see you're here. Hello, Anne. Do you want to have something to say?
Sorry, I wanted to appear. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I think that an output like we just described can be something which is a recommendation or guideline, but to develop specific networks within a broad or disciplinary background, and exploring how what we have experienced as ambassadors that work is working in other countries than those we were working in, which were mainly European, can be something, and it can be presented as an output as sort of testimony. Okay, what has been done, what has worked, what has not worked, and the work of the group can be to, based on that, at least part of it, to develop guidelines to do so, taking into account, maybe we can do a survey on that. Would that work in your country, for example, or would that work in your discipline? So it builds both on this experience and lessons learned and all this, but to build something. And I think that can be something that an interest group can be really welcome in RDA, because this is needed. It's quite rare to take into account what has not worked, to try to develop something positive. Usually you take the good things that has worked and it's splendid, and that's the spirit of making reports for the European Commission. You have to say that it was wonderful, blah, blah, blah. Yes. And then there are all the things that was difficult, that was complicated. I thought this would work and it has not worked well, and try to analyze that and get something out of it that can be useful for others. I think it would be, that's what we want, to be useful for others.
Yes, I think that's a really fantastic point. And I really like the fact that you're also talking about what didn't work, because I'm sure there are aspects of all of our ambassador roles that we've had over the past few years where we've noticed things didn't work as well as we thought. So I think that I think that's a really practical way of looking at it. And so I think with that, I don't see other hands up just for the moment. And so what I'm going to do, oh no, Francoise, fantastic, go for it.
I just have a comment, not in the last European funded project, but in the previous one. I made interviews of all the ambassadors and produced a document. And I think one of the conclusions of the document was to push the activity towards RDA Global. So I will try, it's on Zenodo somewhere, and I will try to find it. It can be something you put somewhere in the charter. The fact it was a recommendation from the first ambassador program.
Ah, that is actually really good. I'm going to put that in the notes if used. If you have a moment, Francoise, if you have that linked, you could add it.
I will.
Perfect. Thank you.
And maybe just sort of jumping on Francois' comment, because I was the first line support for the ambassadors and the project at the end of the project funding cycle, and I think this is sort of a good example why we need the interest group, because I was aware of the previous funding program. I think I probably had the links to the document, but essentially it's one thing to read a document and that has been written 2-3 years ago versus having an access point to the community that was there. So basically, if when I jumped into the role in the middle of the project, if I had a interest group where I could just go and okay, hey, I'm here, I got given this task, I'm trying to do my best to support this group of people in their project, in their ambassadorships. What should I do? Who can help me? I think this would have been extremely useful. I think, and we would have, I mean, I think the program was great success, but I think the impact might have been even bigger if we had the interest group there. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'd be very, very keen on this idea for the interest group.
I think it's a great point. I'm just writing it into the notes. Thank you. Apologies for the slightly disjointed way that we're running the start, but I think it's just some absolutely fantastic comments. And honestly, even though I've made the slides, Beth and I have, and Matti have been working on the slides, I'm very happy to have this kind of free-form discussion as well. So don't feel that just because I'm going to show you agenda that happens to be the second slide as an agenda, we don't have to sit hard on the different timings and sections of the agenda. I think this is really wonderful, and it really reinforces the feeling that we've all had over the last sort of 6 to 10 months where we've been working towards this charter, that what we're doing is the right way to go. I'm looking at the list and we have no hands up at the moment, but again, please do either just interrupt me or put your virtual hand up as we move through the slides. Okay, fantastic. I am going to show you the agenda I just was speaking about. I will provide you with a short background of the RDA Ambassador Program that Beth has provided for us and Matti, and then we're going to move into some of the key points of the interest group charter. And if you look in the collaborative session notes, there's links not just to the Birds of a Feather session from the last plenary, but also links to this slide. And I really thought I put in a link to the charter, but you know what? I'm going to do that right now. I will have to just come out of presentation mode for a second because it looks like I did not. And you can have a look at the charter while I do so. So I'll put that in the chat, and I'll also put that in the notes. Okay, perfect. Let's go back to the slides. Okay, so what we're going to do after I give you a little introduction to the charter is we're going to hear from some previous ambassadors as well as some friends about their thoughts, as we have already started to hear now, on the charter. And then that will lead us into a discussion on exactly how the more concrete aspects of what we imagined would be the activities of the interest group. And we'd like you to just vote on which ones would be most relevant to you. And we're not using Menti because then we were going to struggle to have Beth set the Menti, then me run the Menti on the 2 separate sessions. And we were a little concerned it wouldn't work right. So we're just using the collaborative notes, and you'll see a table in there to look at later. And that's where we'll be sort of voting and commenting. And then we'll talk a little bit about possible next steps, as Anne and Francoise and some of the others have talked about in the context of different regional areas and also different cross-discipline sort of future work trying to engage in that way. All right, so the first section is the background of the ambassador program. And I know we're not really here to talk about the ambassadors as such, but a little bit of background might be useful to those of you in the meeting today who may not have heard of the RDA Ambassador Program yet. And we do have a few ambassadors here with us today, and a few more that will come on the other session. So the RDA Domain Ambassadors were funded through 2 European projects, which is why Anne, as one of our alumni ambassadors, was talking about broadening beyond Europe as one of the goals of this interest group. And the idea was to provide an opportunity for communities to contribute to these various outputs and developments in the context of the European Open Science Cloud, who were the funders of the ambassadorships. And 14 were funded, and they ran for about 18 months each. And each ambassador had their own particular domain, hence the name Domain Ambassadors. And so we had lots of different research areas and angles that we were looking at, which is pretty exciting. Here's one of the bits of the posters. Connie, I can't remember if you actually were made this one, or was it Beth? Anyway, Connie, who is helping out at least until 8:30, and Beth were the ones who did a lot of work in this area at the time. But it's just, the reason I like this slide is because it shows that even as a domain ambassador, part of our role was to do engagement and outreach. There's this peer insight section, there's this outreach section, there's this communication section on this slide. It really talks about how from the beginning, you were not just doing work as an ambassador, you had a particular concrete output, you also had these sort of more soft outputs of socials and outreach and engagement and training. So this slide is a little snapshot of the different disciplinary group requests from a survey that was done. And it's saying, look at all these different areas. We do actually have some of these groups already, and others we don't have them yet. But even if we did take the results of the survey and make a bunch of new working groups for those ones that are missing, there'll still be people coming in the future. Just 1 second. Thank you, sweetheart. Have a great day. There'll still be people who are coming in future from domains that aren't yet represented. So where do these lone wolves go, for example? But not just domains. Newcomers, as Maddie was saying, he thought that it might have been quicker and maybe even more impactful if there had been an interest group like this back when he came in to sort of jump into the RDA work. And so moving on from the background, just to a brief introduction of the charter, which is something that we really want to focus on today, not the charter document itself. We're not going to look at grammar or anything like that, but the activities around it. At the last session in Salzburg, they ran a Menti session about how would it benefit you to have an interest group like this. And so you don't have to read the tiny print here. I will just summarize that most of the benefits seem to be coming along the lines of support and sharing of experience and connectedness. So I think we're getting a lot of people saying what they've been saying this morning. A useful entry point for new RDA members, the ability to help professionals and other research roles at any stage of their careers to help with connectivity and learning where they might find new engagements. And also perhaps some kind of bottom-up feedback to the Secretariat in general, or even targeted feedback from this interest group, which has hopefully more of a cross-domain capability in terms of the outputs of the RDA working groups. So the charter talks about some high-level benefits to start with. The first being social capital and networking. And I won't to sort of belabor this point because I think we've had a nice introduction to it in the introduction to this session. But there's a lot of things that the RDA can do, and it's one of the most welcoming communities I've ever been a part of. But it can be quite big. And so what it might provide us with is a way of sort of making that just a little bit smaller to increase connectivity. So the other thing that the charter mentions is outreach within their communities. So if somebody has come into the RDA and has learned some valuable skills or tools or technical, read more guidance, read the outputs, wants to apply them back in their own communities, maybe this interest group can help them with some skills and support around that. We can facilitate interaction among RDA groups and create opportunities perhaps for recognition, attribution, even mentorship. These are just ideas at the moment, and it'd be great to see if we can develop any of them. Drilling down a little bit more into the specific objectives, then we can think about the practical things we'd be doing, like gaining membership that would allow us to sort of leverage the fact that each member of the interest group would likely come from a different discipline. Hi, honey. That's just my second one going to school. There we are. And also facilitating dissemination and adoption of the RDA outputs themselves. That's what we talked about a little bit, and bringing the outputs back to the community. Supporting conversations between communities. So if somebody comes to us from a working group or just from a community and says, I really think that talking to this other group would benefit, what's the best way we can facilitate that? I do see interest group meetings as being highly fluid, and maybe one of the sessions might be an invitation to multiple working groups to come and talk about a particular topic. And also building on the existing networking capacity by signposting these possible collaborations, as I said. And of course, finally, if there are any questions and issues that need to be addressed by working groups or RDA recommendations. So perhaps someone comes here as a starting place because they have a particular question or a particular need. And then we see if that's a need that the RDA maybe it makes sensible to be fulfilling and can be linked to an existing working group. And of course, increased visibility of people who are working in this area. So if you join the interest group and you're an active member and you're networking, not just within this interest group, but maybe an additional professional network, then maybe that we can identify possible collaboration opportunities there. So let's just see. I've got a note here about from Stephanie about how are we connecting with the early career interest group. And Matty is correct. I think we have talked about the early career. I think the closest we got to it was letting them know about this session, I think. But there's a lot that's the thing, there's a lot of overlap. And so I think that interest groups like the early career and engagement one would be really valuable. And I think the main reason one of the reasons we're looking to create a new interest group is that we're looking across your sort of research career and not just the early career focus. But I think that engagement with that interest group would be very, very sensible. So, oh, look at that. I put two gray ones in order. So what we've got now is we're going to move a little bit onto the feedback on activities. Now, what I've done for this section, and I'm just going to go through this slide and then I'm going to ask, oh, that's why I did it. I did it because that's the slide for introducing the other groups. Now I remember the order in which I presented these slides. Matty, does it make sense if you go ahead and start us off and then I bring in the other people who have agreed very kindly to provide their thoughts?
Sure. If you don't mind me jumping the queue, I think, I mean, as a side effect of my background, I will end up kind of explaining the background a little bit.
So I've stopped
so
sharing. Do you want to put your slides up?
Sure. There. So yeah, as I said, on September 22, I essentially started the best job I ever had so far. I was sort of jumped into the middle of the funding program, supporting RDA ambassadors and also project funded through this project. And okay, sorry. So the project was called EOS Future. It was a 40 million euro kind of lighthouse project, about 100 partners, and they reserved 1 million euros for third-party support. And they funded 14 RDA domain ambassadors, but also there was 26 projects that were targeting picking up, for example, RDA recommendations or doing concrete work and actually doing, let's say, as a side effect of this work, they did also quite a lot of outreach work, and we have actually two of these project representatives here who also de facto became like ambassadors. They do also other things, but they have been staying on, even though the project itself, they were formally limited to 6 months, and you had a usually larger group of people creating some kind of tangible output. So in any case, the landscape was quite complex. There were 40 grants. Of course, that meant that you had 40 legal departments that were at least indirectly involved. You had the project itself with 100 partners, collaborating projects, and the whole idea of the funding was actually create links between the RDA community and the EOS, the European Open Science Cloud community. So it was a quite interesting environment, and this kind of brought in the first challenge, which is the Dunbar's number, essentially the popular understanding, how many people can you really know? And there's this definition in a way that, okay, to really know somebody, you run into them in a pub and you kind of automatically join them. So the estimate is that this is about 150. And I think in a way, if you're facilitating a group, I think the cross-grant, cross-domain innovation support, it actually is possible only within the Dunbar space. So, I mean, okay, people meet each other, but if we want to sort of accelerate this, it's sort of these things that I ended up doing quite a lot of. Have you talked with this person about this? So, in a way, if you do the first line support, you become aware that there is a limit. It's not necessarily 150, but there is a limit. The other challenge is processes. So I hinted at this because we had 40 grantees, 40 legal departments, talking to 4 different partners in the project, and then we were doing networking across the RDA community and the EOSC. So, and I think in most cases, these kind of grants, we were sort of in the sort of first of its kind situation. So there were this situation that, okay, what is this domain ambassador thing? And the legal department needed to be convinced that actually they can accept the money because it's sort of small grant, and in some cases they might see that this is not worth their while. So things happen slowly. So we are in the beginning of the learning curve, and at the same time we are at the peak of the forgetting curve, because there is sort of, you always go back to the emails a week before. It's just sort of something to be aware of. So looking back at my experiences, so what would have sort of worked or what worked? So I think if I was to do this again, I think for everybody involved, you would make sure that it's it's one click for everything. So if you have a meeting, you make sure that you have a link to a document that has a link to the background material. So you have the rolling minutes, so you always have the same URL for the notes. So I think we do these things, they are sort of obvious, but I think in this environment, they are sort of crucial processes. I think standardization, I mean, we kind of went through a couple of different ways of collecting input about what were the outputs. I think if we had a web form, this would have actually saved quite a lot of trouble. So you do Google or Microsoft form and get everything into a spreadsheet in a standardized form. I think this would have even improved the numbers that we can present at the end. Also agreeing on, let's say, categorization statistics and so on before the start of the funding program. So essentially you do the skeleton of the report at the beginning before the first project starts. I think this is something that would have helped, and I think if we were to do it again, I would really insist that we do this, that the tables summarizing the outputs, we agree on a format before the first project starts. I think what I ended up doing quite a lot, because I have a little bit of a science communication background, is that I was kind of embedded journalist role. So I was leveraging my ignorance, asking questions, and saying that, okay, can we explain what you do like this? So it was kind of, I think it must have been a little bit like having a hyperactive 4-year-old joining the meetings and sort of saying that, okay, well, it sounds a little bit like this. And then people usually say, well, kind of, but sort of, but not exactly. And then the not exactly is actually that helped people to sort of get on the same page at what's happening. So I think this sort of facilitator role to a certain degree is sort of helping people to explain in a simpler term what they are doing. So to come up to recommendations. So if you're funding something like this, just be aware of the Dunbar number in a way that you need to have sufficient staffing also for the support. If you want to have this sort of cross-domain innovation and so on, I think you need to make sure that you're not overloading people who are the first line support. And defining outputs, doing templates, contract templates, I think this is something that making them as simple as possible. I think that's something that would help. For the interest group, I think I keep on saying this in the way many times. I think the ambassador concept and a term is very important, but we need to make sure that everybody understands that there is a group beyond the ambassadors. I think managing the support program, I think, yeah, these lessons learned, I think capturing them, finding people who have done something similar, also considering them in scope could be useful. I think also thinking about social capital, I mean, we talked about this already, because there is a group of people who went through the same program, and connecting this group with the other groups, I think that would be the role of good role for the interest group. And then finally, if you end up doing something similar, jumping in the middle of the project into the support, then yeah, the first thing, don't panic. I think people looking into these outreach tasks, they self-select. I mean, they are nice, forgiving people, and already from the nice, forgiving people at the RDA itself. So you kind of get these people who are sort of nice to be around. I mean, yeah, you won't get everything right the first time around, but I think it's a really nice experience. So for this, I'm hoping to run with the interest group idea with you, and I just included my contact details, but they are also in the shared notes. So thank you.
Thank you, Matti. Is that a stock photo or is that a dog of yours?
That's our master.
Oh, it's your dog. Oh, it's a great picture. Those were some fantastic slides. You need to put that picture into the Pets of RDA topic on Hoover. Oh my goodness. Anyway, thank you really. I appreciate that. And I think there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm happy to hear any comments in just a moment. The one thing I particularly saw of interest in there right on your last slide was talking about the social capital and the fact that the ambassador name and the sort of role of an ambassador is something that is important. And certainly it's something that we've talked about in the last plenary, as well as in our sort of meetings in between, that although unfunded now, if someone is engaged enough, it doesn't have to, anyone can be in the interest group, but if someone is engaged enough to want to say, this is a particular thing I'd like to do within the interest group, and I'm going to write it up and formalize it in some way, then maybe it's something we need to talk to the RDA about. Can we make a title like champion or ambassador that they can use for a certain amount of time while they're implementing their plan? Anyway, it's just a general idea. Does anyone else have any comments at the moment before we move on to the other speakers we have today? I don't see any. We've got Anne.
Hello. So thank you very much for your slides, thoughts, and presentation, Matti. I just want to say that although I really appreciated all these tables, how to combine our outputs in something that could be coherent. At the same time, when thinking of this group, I was thinking, now we get out, if we get the group going, out of this funded project discipline, frame, prison in a way. You have to manage a project in such a way that and being an ambassador has many facets that doesn't fall into a frame, into a table. You cannot summarize a life or a part of your life in a table. So I was thinking that more freedom in the kind of output way to communicate messages. I would say it's an output, but the way to communicate messages out of a table of things that make easy the combination of all these different projects when you have to get one report to the commission is one of the things I find attractive in that group, that we are not a funded project in an interest group. We are a group of people that exchange and try to make something that is useful for others, not just that satisfies a funder. And of course, this cannot be written as such in the charter. But I think this freedom of organization and still being efficient, and all what you say is very useful, Matti, is one of the things I find attractive into the having a group that is not part of funded project, but part of an organization that has a general goal like RDA. That's just what I wanted to say. I was a quite rebel ambassador in terms of filling the tables. I did the report, but my way of doing things was not adapted to filling regularly the tables, I would say.
I mean, if I'm completely honest, the way that we were doing the reporting, it was not adapted to humans. I think this is basically sort of something I'm taking on myself. I mean, at least if I can say that, okay, same URL, here's the form, anything that comes to mind, put it in. I think we would have gotten even more sort of nice numbers to report. I mean, this was pretty amazing. I mean, essentially we had a 170 presentation, 140 reports. We are probably missing at least 50%. And if you look at the funding, if you look at an average easy funded project, what you get out of 1 million, it's it's 1/10 of that, if that. So I think it's something that, yeah, you need to pay the piper in a way, that you need to sort of have the numbers. I was kind of rebelling. Luckily I had colleagues who kind of persisted and said that, okay, well, we need to come up with something like this, because it's you get this out of the way, and then you start to talk about the real impact. And I think the real impact would come, like you say, after the funded period. If you have people, if you have an engagement mechanism that allows you to stay as a part of the community and contribute your lessons learned and your knowledge and contact networks, I think the impact of the work that was funded will grow in the future. And then, yeah, you have the freedom at that stage.
That's great. I think it was first Alexandra and then Francoise.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to add on what Matti was saying. As one of the grantees, I could say that Matti's role was very valuable, that he coordinated and facilitated, and is praising him. And is one of the main factors why I, for example, am still interested in contributing and participating in the RDA. So someone to help navigate the RDA, and not just that, but also I think to motivate and to encourage you to join, because sometimes if you are coming from a developing country, or if you have a smaller scale service, you don't always feel like invited to participate or to use some of the resources. So these kind of people really help. And in fact, one of the previous RDA employees was the one who emailed me about the RDA grant, and I wouldn't have applied if he hadn't said, like, yeah, this is perfect for you, just go for it. So someone to, it's sometimes not enough to just educate about the resources, but also to motivate and encourage certain groups to participate. And Matti did that, so yeah.
That's lovely. And I have to say, I agree 100%. I think the support we had as ambassadors, I know it was funded, but it did make a big difference in finding a way to do that in a more lightweight way, as a sort of peer group would be really fantastic. Francoise, you were next.
Yes, what I remember from the previous program, ambassador program, is that the contribution of the individual ambassadors was very different from one to the other, because it also depends on the level of maturity of their community. So
Yeah.
this means I think it will be good that the IG can keep track of the activities of its members, but in a form which is as free as possible. And I agree with Anne on that. I think you need to have tables, but that they need to be open, because people can contribute from very different, on different aspects, let's say.
Yes, the contributions will be very different individually. I think that's a really good point. And as part of the ambassadorship, I started a champion program within our project, and I found that that's really true. There are some people who contribute in very different ways from others, and having a single way to say, like, if you want to be a champion with us, you have to do these 5 things each year, was the wrong way to go about it. And it really didn't allow for the freedom that was necessary for the different people in the program to do what they wanted with it. So I think it's the benefit, as well as the maybe also a constraint when we're running this as a sort of a volunteer run effort. And you have your hand up.
Just on what you said, which is very true. I just want to give one example. What I ended up doing was what was very useful was the regular meetings of ambassadors at a given time.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there or we were not, but we had the possibility to give some input in the rolling notes, even if we were not able to come into the. And what I ended up in doing was just to use the rolling notes to flash ideas that came to my mind or from my experience as ambassador, or just reporting, I've done this, I've done that, so what do you think? But this requires, and this is related to what Françoise and you said about different formats adapting to different ways of being an ambassador. It requires some people, and Matti did that, and you also, somebody to take all this matter and extract main messages, things. Françoise did that when she was doing the interviews in the previous project. So that might influence the way we organize this interest group, if it comes, because it can be very rich in terms of input if people are active. But then the synthesis, the creating the output actually is really a job. So that's the counterpart of freedom. If you are contributing in very different ways, which capture a lot of information, then you need a work to make the synthesis. And that just has to be taken into account in the way the group is organized, who is doing what. So
Yeah.
that was just what I wanted to say.
That's
There is
fantastic.
always a second, a reverse side of the medal.
Yes, of course. We couldn't have it any other way. The next person we have, I've put on the list, Alexandra, would you like to show us your slide? I can share your screen, but I think you have co-host ability to share your screen yourself.
Yeah, I can do it. I think, I mean, I always advocate for online events, and then this morning I had some internet issues.
Oh, well,
So if
now.
something happens, just share my slide and say, yeah, she tried.
We can do that, yes.
So yeah, I'm a research assistant at the University of Belgrade in Serbia, and I was one of Matti's grantees. And during our project, we worked on improving our repository of open access ecological instruments. So for research data, a smaller scale repository at our lab. And also during our project, we involved students and presented our outputs to our local communities, such as the Open Science Community Serbia, which I'm also part of. So that's just to give context to my recommendations. And also my lab is very involved in and practices open science. And I'm also a member of informal network of researchers from the Global South and Eastern Europe called ABRIR, and we work on advocating increased representation and inclusivity in open science and victim science. The RDA grant was the first funding we received for our repository. Before that, it was run completely on volunteer basis. So I think it's important to have these grants that support smaller size projects like this grant was geared towards, so smaller scale community projects to advocate for that. So another good thing that came from the project and that I would like to see more of in the future in the interest group was that we were able to promote our data and our services to a wider and a global community. So we talked at the RDA plenary, or we registered our services with the youth portal. It also meant increased visibility for our institution, so that's really an incentive for institutions to join RDA. It also, during our project, it was really great that we could connect with people from other disciplines and countries. Also, of course, fair data, we got the opportunity to learn more and to apply it. So we used the fair data maturity model and got introduced to the fair sharing registry. Yeah, we used our project to promote RDA and open science in general to the stakeholders in our community. So we wrote blogs and webinars and we had some posts on social media. So those are the kinds of activities that I would like for the interest group to support in the future. And I'll just give some recommendations on how that could be done better, or what else could be done in the future. So as I said, this was the first funding we received for our service, which I think speaks to a wider issue that academics, researchers in general, are not well rewarded or incentivized for practicing open science. So that also means that we usually don't have the time to engage with RDA and RDA resources during our working hours. And I think that sometimes, even during this plenary, everyone keeps saying like, yeah, researchers should do that, researchers should do this, but we don't have the time. And usually, for example, at our institution, we also don't have that data stewards or project managers, so we have to do everything on our own. And I know that RDA can't change those root problems, but for example, some people that can act as ambassadors and champions, some contact points would be useful. So that would motivate us, or that we could ask about grants or some resources. And I think it would be great to have more specific people who are focused on specific disciplines or specific regions or even countries, because sometimes if you're talking to a Europe ambassador, it's not, that doesn't mean that it will be completely relevant for your context, for example, for Serbia. So also during our dissemination activities, we realized that a lot of people, our peers, are not familiar with RDA, but we just didn't have enough time to educate them fully or to promote it enough. So in the future, we would like even more promotional materials, maybe some that we could easily adapt or translate. So reusable materials, fair promotional materials. It would also be nice if we could in advance have a list of people who are open to visiting us online to talk about the RDA in general. So a list of experts that were willing to give talks for free. And also just keep having these accessible online events. I know there's RDA for newcomers sessions are organized, but yeah, more of that. And it's sometimes not enough to just organize it, but also to advertise it. So yeah, the interest group could advocate for that. Also, I noticed that by talking to my fellow researchers that they don't really see a connection with RDA and open science, which is really relevant for us. So just more emphasis on how RDA connects to the open science movement and the reproducibility of research findings, because that is a topic that's really relevant to a lot of especially psychology researchers and yeah, in other sciences, but that would motivate them to join RDA. So maybe some success stories or use cases could be written that really emphasize that link. So yeah, I think someone also mentioned already in the chat that this interest group could relate to the early careers interest group. So yeah, we wanted to involve students in our project, but we really didn't have the resources, materials that are tailored for that early career non-expert students. And I just have a vision of RDA juniors. So maybe that's something to think about, like an interest group just really for undergraduate students, graduate students. Just, yeah, just a very broad recommendation. But yeah, and as I mentioned about grants, we sometimes don't feel like invited or capable to apply if we are coming from Global South or Eastern Europe. So apart from reaching out to us, there could be calls that are specifically inviting those regions, that are specifically for people from that region. And our experience is that our organizations are not always open to supporting those kinds of projects. So if we could apply as individuals or for smaller grants, that would also be great. So the interest group could advocate for those kinds of calls. And generally, so I also put some links and logos on the right. So those are different informal organizations, local collaborations that I think RDA can work with. There are certainly similar ones in other countries. So not just big universities, but also some informal open science and research data organizations. Because speaking from my experience, universities are sometimes reluctant to join RDA or just don't have the funds to be an organizational member to pay that membership fee. So maybe some kind of other more informal ways to connect RDA and some organizations would be welcome. So that's it from me for now.
Thank you, Alexandra. That's really amazing. I really appreciate that. And yes, I think we can see where closer ties with early career researchers interest group. Also, we don't want to take over the role of the newcomers stuff that RDA already provides. This is more about targeted cross-domain collaboration and integration with people as they come in. Thank you so much, Alexandra. The next one we have is Rory. I know you don't have any slides, but we're very happy to hear your thoughts, please. And we still need to leave about 20 minutes at the end, if 15 minutes, just for people to vote on those activities. I don't mind leaving just a few small minutes, but let's just keep in mind that we would like to hear from all of you about which activities are your favorites. So we'll do that after these talks. Rory, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Alison. Hi, everyone. So actually, I'm not an ambassador. I'm one of the other categories of people that Maddie mentioned, which is the project groups. And it's only today that I actually understand what the ambassadors were all about. So that's been a nice education for me. And I'd like to echo what Alexandra said about the important role that Maddie played, because I wasn't really, in a sense, I didn't really understand what this group was all about. But I kept attending the meetings, and it's really down to Maddie and the amazing job that he did as a far more than a facilitator, but as a convener, as an ambassador within the ambassador group. And then also, he's also become kind of almost a personal advisor of mine. And so, the importance of individuals can't be overstressed. And we all owe Maddie a huge set of gratitude. I don't think we'd be thinking about having a follow-up group if Maddie hadn't done such an amazing job. So, as I said, so my project, I'm not going to talk about my project because I don't think it's really relevant, but for what it's worth, the project was an actual small output, which was, a large output with a small amount of funding, which was to explore and then implement IGSNs, the new International Generic Sample Number, which is now delivered as a DataCite DOI into the sample management system in the product that I'm involved with, RSpace, and then provide some guidelines around generally incorporating PIDs into research tools. If anyone understood that, fine. If you don't, fine as well. But reflecting on what I've been hearing, I've actually been kind of a one-person ambassador. And so I thought I'd describe some of the personal ambassadorial roles I've had, because I think some of them are relevant to kind of things you're thinking about. So one is affecting relationships between existing groups. So I've done that in two instances. One, I created a new interest group called Working with PIDs and Tools. And we are now, the group has been going for a couple of years, and we have a very good relationship with the National PID Strategies Group, which is coming at PIDs from a very different role. a different perspective. And we actually had a joint session with them in Salzburg. And so that's one example of kind of where two groups which have complementary interests are now actually aware of each other and collaborating. The other one is even more ambitious and more current. I was very active in the GORC working group that developed the Global Open Research Commons model. And then I became co-chair of the mapping the landscape of digital research tools working group, where we've just finished our output now. And there's huge complementarity between these two. And the mapping working group is forming a follow-on group. And we're in intense discussions with the GORC group about, in effect, having some kind of joint venture to do something, an output, which I believe might be a fairly innovative thing to do. Anyway, so one thing that this group might think about, I think it's been mentioned, is how to explore new and more productive relationships between existing working groups. A second thing I've done in my informal ambassadorial role is my colleague Vida Plankite actually ended up doing the actual project that I mentioned earlier, and she was new to RDA. She's young, so early career, I guess, and so she became wildly enthusiastic about the RDA through that experience. Through my encouragement, she's now got a BOF in this session of her own, which hopefully will turn into an interest group. That's about workflows in data curation. And she's also active with the early career group. So bringing people from your own organization into the RDA and helping them to be proactive is a second thing, which I think is a very valuable thing that we could all contribute. Then the third thing that I've been active in, it's a bit more amorphous, but it's more like outreach, and I'm interested for different reasons. And I've been outreaching with two different kind of communities. One is the US. I think it's terrible that it's critical for the RDA that the US have become much more active, and I think that's beginning to happen. So I've been just encouraging people I know from the US who are already involved to get more involved. And the other is the Global South. Another group I chair yesterday, we just had a meeting on research infrastructures in the Global South. So exploring ways in which we can get people from the Global South to be more active. So those are some of the things that I've been doing in kind of an informal ambassadorial role, which might be relevant to the group. And then finally, I'll end. I think it's how to get people involved. At Gothenburg, I was invited at that TAB chair group afterwards to speak about my experience getting involved in RDA. And as you can see, I kind of got much too involved. I am probably too involved. And I quoted John Kennedy, who said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And I think it should be, ask not what the RDA can do, ask what you can do for the RDA, because it's when you get involved that you make a contribution, but actually you get the most out of it. So thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic, and I like the quote at the end. That's a great way to finish. I wanted to know. I lost the participant thing, so I'm just oh, there it is. Thank you. Matty has applauded you, Rory. So I'm a little slow on the reaction button on Zoom. I must learn how to do that more quickly. If anyone has any questions, then please let us know or put it in the chat. Otherwise, we can bring Rory's comments in. Especially, I love how you gave us the particular use case where you were working with GORC to produce an output. And I think that's a great example. Then Francoise, you are next.
Yes, so I have a few points. I was asked to have a look at the charter and to comment it, so this is what I did.
That's very
my
helpful.
first comment, and it was approved by Stephanie, is that you need chairs from different regions to be accepted as an interest group. Yeah. And I guess you have people from different regions online now, so it should be possible. Then I have here, I have to say I can be an ambassador for astronomy, but it's not with that hat that I am here. I have never been in any European
Is it just me, or have we lost Françoise?
I think we have.
Yeah.
I thought it was just me because I'm often the problem. But Francoise, we've lost your voice. All right, so why don't we come back to Francoise in a minute?
Aspects of,
Oh no,
yes.
she's back.
So you don't
Francoise.
hear me?
Yes, we
Do
can
you
hear
have
you now.
problem?
Do you want to go ahead again?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we can
Do
hear
you
you now.
hear me? Maybe if you put your video off, it will help with the connection. Everybody, I mean. Is it better that way?
Yep.
I can hear
So,
you clearly. Why don't you go ahead and have a go now, please?
yes, okay. So I was saying that chairs should come from different regions for an interest group, that the interest group could be a contact point with the evaluation of research interest group for all the disciplinary aspects of evaluation of research, which are really key to evolve properly the evaluation of research. So I think that it would be very useful, and I have a comment from another participant on WOVA in a private message about that. It would be very useful that you have a list of the disciplines you cover with a name or the names of the people who take care of a discipline, and that this list is public, because one of the things which is very useful, as you said, I guess I understand, is that people who arrive in RDA who are completely lost can find someone from their discipline so that that person can help them to find the most interesting groups, possibly most interesting groups. And so I think it would be very useful to have a public list somewhere. And Bruno, who is here, tells me it could be something in a place very visible in the RDA, somewhere near the place where there is RDA value for disciplines, for instance. So of course, the ambassadors have to accept that the information is public, but I think it would multiply their impact to have their name available when people arrive in the RDA. So I have also a comment about what the group composition, who will participate in the group and be shown on the list. You come from a group of ambassadors which were selected following a process established by an EU project or another EU project. So I understand that the group you plan to set up will be open. So I don't know if you have some kind of idea how to move from ambassadors which were screened somehow towards self-designated ambassadors. And if you do that, it has to be made clear in the charter that you will be open to anyone willing to appear as an ambassador. But then you may have difficulties if people are in the list and don't do the job. So it's a bit complicated here. So that's all what I had to say after reading the charter. Thank you.
I really appreciate that, Françoise, and I think that it's important we do ensure that when we go for co-chairs that we do draw from all around the world as much as we can. And so certainly if anyone wishes to volunteer, feel free to put your name in the notes or here on the chat. Matti.
So it is actually sort of reflecting a little bit on discussion we have had earlier about, let's say, the life cycle management of ambassadorship, because yeah, life happens, you get recruited to another job, and you can no longer answer emails. So I think just some kind of understanding in a way that you if you're an ambassador, you react within a certain number of working days and something like that. So keeping this in mind, I think maybe also some kind of process for sort of as a group approving new ambassadors. I think it could be that some kind of outreach role should be open to everyone, just sort of sign up and so on. But I think maybe the term ambassador, we would want to have a little bit more formalism there, because in a way, like François said, if you're part of the funded program, you have been vetted in a way. People have gone through, so some kind of maybe community process of okay, who will be an ambassador. So I think we might consider this kind of two-tiered approach.
I think that's a great idea. I'm just typing it into the notes as well. Okay, perfect. Bruno, you have your hand up, please.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So I am a newcomer in RDA. So I appreciate this discussion and the exchanges. I have many things to learn, so sorry about that. I'm a physicist in astronomy. So this is why I know well Françoise. And I am also ambassador of software heritage.
An ambassador of what? Sorry, Bruno.
Software heritage.
Oh, okay.
So the big universal archive for any kind
I
of
know the
software.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What I realize is that, so if I understand a bit the exchanges here, that you have somehow ambassadors like somehow area in the world. We might have ambassadors also per discipline. And I think it's super important indeed. Personally, as a physicist, I think it's even more important than by area because we are working with everybody in the world. So if it's here or there, it doesn't matter. And I have an open thought, a point to exchange. Maybe it's out of topics here, because as a project manager of a software, when I try to apply fair principles and fair for research software principles, what I need at the end, it's not recommendations, it's not data models, it's data format. When I want to code, I need a data format. And who is making data format based on the recommendations, based on data models, is big software projects. Like, for example, CodeMeta for the metadata of software, the other type of big software projects that create such format. And at the end, as a developer, completely, my daily life, I first have a look on the data format project that link to the data models and to the recommendations, obviously. But the first action that I do is to look at the data format. And so I'm wondering, maybe it is a case in RDA, but I am a newcomer, so sorry, maybe it's a naive question. Do you have a system to have official bridge with such big software projects? Because at the end, this is them that create the format. For example, as a physicist, as an basic illustration, I was searching for a metadata to say that a co-author of my software has 2 affiliations, which is quite obvious. But in the CodeMeta, it's not possible. It's really stupid, very basic. But so at the end, what I did, I just put an issue on the CodeMeta project to say, I would like to have 2 affiliations for the author, not only one. So and I think there is a data model associated to that. But so as an individual, I did a request, but I'm wondering if it could not be more efficient in order to make concrete, pragmatic progress from the recommendations of open science. If we could have official bridge with such big software projects, and maybe, I don't know if the ambassador has a correct way of doing it, but I think a direct link to these projects are quite important in the different topics. So the federation, identity providers, etc., in each topics.
Thank you, Bruno. I think that brings a couple of things to mind. The first is that it really depends on your discipline, and I find it really interesting to investigate a bit more into astronomy, which isn't an area I know well. For example, in the life sciences where I come from, the vast majority of the standards and models and guidance come from the community, not from companies. And proprietary formats from instruments and things tend to get converted into these community developed standards before deposition in repositories. But it doesn't sound like that's the case in astronomy. And so integrating with these companies is an interesting idea. And certainly there's the Oracle for Research working groups that I think have been, Oracle for Research have partially funded the running of 2 of these working groups. Matti, I don't know if you have some more information, being RDA or one of the other people who are closer to the RDA structures could give more information, but that would certainly be one route. It's not unheard of for RDA to partner with such companies. Matti, do you have any thoughts on that?
I saw Alex actually already unmuting her, so maybe.
Oh, Alex, okay.
But it's not only about companies.
I can comment, because the mapping the landscape of digital research tools is, there's 2 Oracle has funded 2 working groups, and one is on multi-omics and the other one is the mapping one that I'm involved with. So I thought it was a fantastic experience. Oracle funded it, so that means we have a facilitator, which means we can be a lot more productive. There's actually a fantastic person from Oracle who was part of the group, who turned out to be one of the most productive members of the working group, who contributed a lot. And there was not a hint from him or anyone else of Oracle trying to, I can't figure out why they did it. I don't even think it's relevant to Oracle. They were far from trying to influence or gain anything from it. But so that was that. I would think if the RDA could find others like Oracle who play that kind of role, it would actually be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, just to add that this is part of the RDA for industry framework. So the plan is to find more cases like this. Bruno's trying to raise his hand.
Bruno, were you
Yeah. Indeed, we speak about private company here after my comment, but a data format is not necessarily made by private company. It can come from the community. I give an example in the chat. The EVOA OPSCORE format is coming from the EVOA, which is scientifically open and made by the community. That other type of format, the OGIP format, is made by the NASA community. So there are many data formats made. Sorry. There is many data format made by the community. It's not all about private company. This is my point. And so for such open for projects, I mean, there is really the possibility to make bridges.
Okay, I think that's really useful, and please do check the notes, Bruno, and make sure that what we've got, I only put a few notes there, but add to it, please, if you want to make sure that your point comes across very clearly. I immediately, of course, wanted to say fair sharing provides a whole registry of standards. You can find one you like, but I do also know that although IVOA in astronomy has done a lot of work in creating records and fair sharing, if there's a lot of proprietary formats, we probably don't have them, and it would be interesting to have them registered. So I know that Francoise and Bruno are both in astronomy, so maybe I'll find you later as a separate topic, because I'm aware we have only 10 minutes now. Alex, thank you also for your input on that. I think the RDA and the industry stuff is definitely a great route, especially if there's some ability for example, in the astronomy to have a connection there. The last few minutes, and actually this is perfect because I was actually concerned that we would have lots of time to put our little votes in, and then I would be twiddling my thumbs trying to figure out how to finish the session. But the conversations have been so fantastic that I've let them run deliberately, because that's really been what we've been looking for the most. But what I have done, and I'm not going to share my slides again, but I will just share my screen just so you can see what's going on in terms of this part of the notes, is we'd like you all to open the notes again. Matti, would you mind just popping the link in the chat again one final time? I was trying to share my screen, but I don't think I've succeeded. I think Zoom is tired. But if you look in the notes and you look at the place where we've all been taking writing comments and making notes, there's a section called questions. And there's a big table that's in green and white because I wanted to make it similar to the colors the RDA likes to use. And all I'm asking is that you go through there, and these are the different activities that have been listed both in the charter and in various discussions that we've had at the last BOF and also in meetings since then about possible activities. Do you think these activities are suitable for an interest group like this? If they are suitable, do you like them? Vote for the ones you like and that you feel are suitable by putting a little plus in those ones. And I've organized them according to themes as written in the charter. So, and I've copied the entire text from the charter, so you don't have to flip back and forth too much. If you think there are some that are missing, either from the discussion today or that you've just thought of, please feel free to add new rows and vote for them. So while we do that voting, and I do appreciate everyone voting, and I can see some votes coming in, it's really nice. So if the 20 or so of you who are here today you can vote more than once. You don't have to have just one vote. Just go ahead and we want to get sort of straw poll of those things that are most relevant to the people here today. I'll just briefly cover the next steps while you guys are voting, because I feel after I've done that, if there's any final comments to do with these activities or in general, I'm very happy to hear them. I don't actually know if we get cut off at 9:30 or if I'm just supposed to stop at 9:30, but I guess we'll find out. We want to finalize the charter. That is the most important part of our next steps. And as part of that, of course, we're going to have to do things like Francois said, like finding co-chairs from representative regions and areas, domains. So if there's any ideas that you guys have about that, also we aim to have this, we want to have a sort of loose structure so the meetings would be regular, like Anne says, but they'd be on different topics. And some of the activities in that document that you're voting on now do talk about the types of meetings that we could have: more informal ones, more formal ones, ones that are primarily about networking, ones that are about cross-disciplinary collaboration. So we're going to be thinking more about how we'd structure what would come as a result of the interest group. I think that's really all I wanted to add as a sort of final step. I do know that at the bottom of the table, underneath it, we've also added some open questions. And if you have some time as we reach the end of the meeting after you've voted, then maybe providing your answers under there, some of which we've already talked about in the session today, but if you have some thoughts around this. And these open questions are things like, how do we make this sustainable? We talked a little bit about the life cycle of the different roles that might exist as part of the interest group. What are barriers to participation? We've talked a little bit about regional issues, issues of domain. How do we promote cohesion? How do we make people feel like they have an identity as someone in this interest group? So not just an identity as an RDA member, which I certainly feel quite strongly, and I expect others do as well, but an identity as someone who's in the RDA who has this extra role of facilitation, outreach, and engagement, and who would like to do what? Volunteers around that. So any of these open questions, or indeed if you have a final question to pose, then please put it in that section as well. And I see we've got lots. Oh, this is so helpful. There's lots of great votes here. So if you do get the chance at the end of this, you're voting to think about these questions and put an answer in, that's great. Otherwise, does anyone else have some final comments to make? And if not, that's okay. You don't have to speak. We can absolutely just say a great big thank you and get the meeting finished on time. Let me just check the list. No one has their hands up. So what I will say is, can I especially thank those who came to speak, and that's Matty and Rory and Alexandra. And who else have we got from the session today? Oh, yes, and Francoise. Thank you so much, Francoise. And we have Francis's slide you can look at, but I expect he'll probably be in the other session. And also thank you to everyone who provided so many valuable comments during the session and took notes and voted. So I wanted to say thank you all very much. Francoise, do you have, you look like you were about to say something. Did you want to add
Yes,
anything?
just to tell you, there are many things in the chat. Some of them we put in the meeting notes, but you may have to copy it completely, or the secretariat does it, I don't know. But
I don't know if
I
it's
think
done.
you should copy the chat and put it in the session notes, because
I'm
there
going
are
to
things
save
which
the
have not been
chat.
put
I think
there.
that's a good point. But Matty, would you save the chat too? Just because Zoom is a little bit.
Anyone
confusing.
can do it.
Yeah.
I think I've just done it. So there's the 3 dots next to Zoom Room 4 where you can just click and then say save chat.
I did attempt to do that. Thank you very much. But Zoom has stopped giving me pop-up windows. I think I need to restart Zoom. It wouldn't let me share my screen properly a second ago. So if someone else does it too, then we can just make sure we've got it. It might have saved it silently without giving me a pop-up, but I didn't get the normal window.
Yeah, I seem to be also having difficulties. I think, Francois, you read my mind. I was just going to say that there was great discussion in the meeting and on the chat. So yeah, we should.
So then if Matthew's also having problems, then if any of the 20 of us are able to save the chat, then
I
please
think I just managed. So
you did it, Matty. Fantastic.
Yeah,
And we'll put it
yeah.
in. I do think Connie said that it was going to it would automatically do stuff because she set the recording going before she left. But thank you for saving the chat as well. Right. Thank you all. You didn't get a pop-up either, Stephanie. Right. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate this session. Was really helpful and really amazing. And you guys have some great ideas. So thank you all very much and have a lovely rest of your plenary.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.